So I want you to just look down at whatever you're touching right now.
Yeah, take a second and really look at it.
Right. Because if you're holding a smartphone, or maybe you're listening to this through wireless earbuds, or sitting behind the wheel of a modern car, I mean, even if you're just standing in your kitchen staring at a pantry full of canned food, you are relying on this singular, completely invisible force.
It's everywhere. And we never think about it.
Exactly. We never think about it. We tend to name our historical epochs after the loudest, most aggressive materials we can dig out of the ground, right? The Stone Age, the Iron Age.
Oh, for sure. We obsess over materials that let us, smash things or cut things.
Yeah, or build these towering monuments to ourselves. But today, we're doing a deep dive into a stack of research, this really sweeping, heavy document that's simply titled tin.pdf.
Such an unassuming title for what it actually covers.
Right. And the mission of this deep dive today is to completely shift your perspective on this pale, deceptively soft metal, because it essentially acts as the hidden infrastructure of all of human civilization.
Yeah. I mean, it really is the ultimate story of invisible dependence. Like you said, we worship structural strength. Things like iron, steel, titanium.
The big flashy metals.
Exactly. Metals that leave a very obvious physical mark on the world. But tin operates entirely behind the scenes. Like, it doesn't build the skyscraper, but it ensures the building's nervous system actually fires.
I love that. And I kept reading through these sources, looking for a way to encapsulate it. And I kept coming back to this idea of tin as the line cook of metallurgy.
Oh, that's good. The line cook.
Yeah, or maybe like the quiet IT engineer working in the basement of civilization. It's definitely not flashy like gold. It's not aggressive like iron. But if that line cook doesn't show up for their shift, the entire restaurant shuts down.
The whole system crashes.
Right. The emails stop sending, the plumbing bursts, the power grid goes dark. Tin's power doesn't come from brute force. It comes from this almost supernatural ability to connect other things.
Well, and before we even get to how it built the modern world, the sources take us way down into the geological engine room, so to speak.
Yeah, to look at what tin actually is.
Right, and the lengths the Earth had to go to create it are frankly absurd. I mean, the physical reality of tin defies a lot of our basic assumptions about how metals behave.
How so?
Well, if you look at the periodic table, pure tin, its chemical symbol is Sn, which comes from the Latin stannum, by the way.
SN, right? Oh.
Yeah, so it sits in group 14. And this is a very strange neighborhood in chemistry. It's the carbon group.
Okay, so carbon is in there.
Right. You have carbon at the top, which is a nonmetal. Then you go down to silicon and germanium, which are metalloids. And then you finally cross the threshold into post-transition metals with tin and lead.
So it's kind of straddling the fence between two completely different states of matter then.
Exactly, which explains why its physical properties are so weird. The documentation notes that it's soft enough to literally cut with a knife.
Wait, really? A metal you can just slice?
Oh yeah, it's highly malleable, incredibly resistant to corrosion. And get this, it melts at 231.93 degrees Celsius.
Okay, 231 Celsius, which if you are a blacksmith or a metallurgist is basically room temperature.
It's nothing.
You could melt tin on a standard kitchen stove if you wanted to.
You absolutely could. And that low melting point is crucial to its utility later on. But the weird part is the formation of the metal itself involves some of the most extreme temperatures and pressures on the planet.
It's like a contradiction.
It really is, and it requires an immense amount of geological patience. Tin primarily forms through these magmatic hydrothermal processes.
Okay, magmatic hydrothermal. Paint a picture for me.
Okay, so to visualize this, picture a massive chamber of cooling granitic magma, and it's sitting miles beneath the Earth's surface.
Just a giant subterranean lake of molten rock.
Yes. And as that magma slowly cools, and we're talking over tens of millions of years, the more common minerals begin to crystallize and solidify first.
So they're hardening up.
Right, they form these rigid, stable silicate lattices, but tin atoms have this highly specific ionic radius and electrical charge that makes them, well, highly awkward.
Awkward in what way?
Geologists literally classify tin as an incompatible element. It simply does not fit into those early crystal structures.
It's the puzzle piece that refuses to snap into the border. So what happens to it? It just gets pushed out.
It gets continuously rejected. As the surrounding magma solidifies into rock, The incompatible tin gets concentrated into the remaining deeply pressurized, superheated residual fluids.
Wow. Okay, I'm picturing the way salt behaves when seawater freezes. Like the ice itself is fresh water because the salt gets squeezed out of the crystal structure, right?
Exactly.
And it leaves behind this incredibly dense, super salty brine.
That is a brilliant parallel. Except in this case, the brine is a chemically volatile, superheated fluid packed with rare, incompatible metals. And it is desperately seeking an escape route.
Because of all the pressure.
Right. Eventually, the pressure builds to such an extreme that these fluids fracture the surrounding rock and they just shoot up through the crust.
Like a geological geyser.
Kind of, yeah. And as they move toward the surface, the temperature and pressure finally drop, forcing the tin to precipitate out of the fluid. It crystallizes in these deep veins as a heavy, dark, weather-resistant ore called cassiterite, or tin dioxide.
And the time scale the sources give for this is staggering.
Oh, it's immense.
A viable cassiterite deposit doesn't form overnight. It takes tens to hundreds of millions of years. So, you are holding a piece of solder in your phone that literally started baking before the first dinosaur even walked the Earth.
It really puts our technological age into perspective.
It does. But this is where the physics of tin gave me an actual existential crisis. The document details two distinct physical phenomena of pure tin, starting with something called the tin cry.
Ah, the acoustic signature of the crystal lattice.
Yeah, what is that?
Well, if you take a bar of pure solid tin, and because it's so soft, you can do this with your bare hands.
Right.
If you physically bend it, it emits this strange, crackling, screaming sound.
Okay, why is a metal screaming at me? What is mechanically happening inside that bar when I bend it?
You are literally hearing the sound of atomic shearing.
Whoa.
Yeah. Tin has a highly specific crystalline structure. So when you apply mechanical stress by bending it, the crystals don't just gently slide past each other like in other metals.
They don't just bend.
No, they undergo a process called twinning. Segments of the crystal lattice violently snap into a new, mirrored orientation to accommodate the stress.
That sounds aggressive.
It is. The cry you hear is the acoustic emission of millions of microscopic crystals, instantly snapping into new geometric alignments.
That is deeply unsettling. But honestly, it's nothing compared to the phase transition stuff.
The tin pest.
Yes. Because above 13.2 degrees Celsius, which is a brisk 56 degrees Fahrenheit, not even that cold tin exists as white tin, right?
Correct. It's silvery, metallic, conductive, and stable. Its atoms are arranged in a body-centered tetragonal lattice.
But if the temperature drops below that threshold,
Right.
the metal seemingly just loses its mind.
It is one of the most fascinating phase transitions in all of material science.
Explain the mechanism here, because the idea that a structural metal just forgets how to be a metal is terrifying to me. The sources say it expands, stopping conducting electricity, and literally crumbles into a pile of gray powder.
It all comes back to that group 14 position on the periodic table we discussed earlier.
The weird neighborhood.
Exactly. Tin sits right on the edge of being a metalloid. So when it gets cold, it lacks the thermodynamic energy to maintain its metallic tetragonal crystal structure.
Okay.
So to compensate, the atoms rearrange themselves into a diamond cubic structure.
Which is the same structure as a diamond or silicon, right? Meaning it behaves more like a fragile crystal than an actual metal.
Precisely. This new structure is what we call gray tin.
Yeah.
And the fatal flaw is that the diamond cubic lattice is significantly less dense than the metallic lattice. The atomic bonds actually lengthen.
They stretch out.
Right.
Kill
So
them.
as the white tin transforms into gray tin, its volume expands by about 27%.
Wait. Normally things shrink when they get cold. You leave a balloon in the freezer, it shrinks. But tin expands.
Right, because the actual crystal structure demands more space. And because it expands from the inside out, it completely shatters the structural integrity of the object.
It just destroys itself.
Yeah, the metal literally bursts itself apart into a fine dust.
See, I have to challenge the logic of human history here. How did a material that is this fundamentally unstable something that turns to dust on a chilly autumn morning, how does that become the bedrock of modern civilization?
It seems completely counterintuitive.
It does. Like if I build a house out of wood, it rots. That makes sense. But if I build it out of tin, it seemingly deletes itself?
Well, the catch is you would never build a house out of pure tin. That's the paradox. Tin strength isn't about isolation, it's about integration.
Oh, okay. Integration.
Yeah. When you alloy tin with another metal, even in tiny amounts, the tin pest phenomenon is entirely suppressed.
Really? Just a little bit of something else stops the crumbling.
Exactly. The other atoms act as a stabilizing scaffold, locking the tin into its metallic state. And what tin brings to the partnership is this extraordinary chemical property called wetting behavior.
Wetting behavior, I imagine that has nothing to do with water.
Not at all. It has to do with surface energy. When tin is molten, it doesn't just sit on top of another metal like a bead of water on wax.
It doesn't just pool up.
Right. It actively works to lower the interfacial tension between itself and the base metal. It spreads out beautifully and evenly. And more importantly, it actually dissolves a microscopic layer of the base metal.
Wait, it dissolves it?
Yes. It forms a completely new intermetallic compound right at the boundary.
So it's not just gluing two metals together. It is chemically fusing with them. Like, it becomes one flesh with whatever it touches.
It is the ultimate metallurgical diplomat. It wants to bond, it wants to coat, it wants to merge.
Wow.
That wetting behavior, combined with its extremely low melting point and its resistance to corrosion, makes it the perfect connector.
A connector that nature, in her infinite irony, made incredibly difficult to find.
Oh, absolutely.
The sources really emphasize how rare and geographically isolated cassiterite deposits are. You don't just stumble over tin in your backyard.
No, it's very spotty.
And this geological scarcity acts as a massive forcing function for human history, because once ancient humans figured out what tin could do, they were physically forced to connect the globe to get it.
Right, and here we are crossing the threshold into the Bronze Age. And to really understand the magnitude of this shift, we have to look at how humans manipulated matter prior to this.
Which was mostly just hitting rocks against other rocks.
Pretty much. For millennia, technology was subtractive. You take a piece of flint and you chip away at it to make a hand axe, or you take clay and you mold it. You are reshaping what already exists in nature.
Even early copper use was pretty rudimentary, wasn't it? Because copper is soft. You can hammer it cold, you can melt it, but it doesn't hold a sharp edge at all.
Exactly. A copper sword is going to bend the second you hit something hard with it. And that's because pure copper has a face-centered cubic crystal structure. The atomic planes can easily slide past one another under force, which makes the metal soft.
Okay, makes sense.
But then someone discovers that if you melt that copper and add just 10% of this dark, heavy tin ore, you fundamentally alter the architecture of the metal.
This is solid solution strengthening, right?
Yes. The large tin atoms wedge themselves into the copper's crystal lattice. They distort the grid. So those atomic planes can no longer slide past each other easily.
So they're locked in place.
The metal becomes significantly harder. And it casts more cleanly because the tin lowers the melting point and increases the fluidity of the liquid metal.
And suddenly you have a material that holds a razor-sharp edge.
Exactly. Bronze isn't just an upgrade, it's an entirely new philosophical paradigm. Humans are no longer just carving rocks. We are taking two distinct earthly elements, subjecting them to intense heat, and essentially playing God to create a synthetic supermaterial.
And the results of that are world-changing. You get better plows, which means more food. You get durable armor and lethal swords, which means you can conquer your neighbor.
But the bottleneck is what the text refers to as the geography of dependence.
The geography of dependence.
Right. If we look at the cradles of early civilization, Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia, the Minoans and Mycenaeans in Greece, they all had relatively easy access to copper. But almost none of them had local tin.
So nature deals out a deck of cards, gives everyone a Ferrari engine, but hides the keys in another continent.
That's a great way to put it. If you were a Bronze Age king, your entire geopolitical survival depends on arming your military with bronze. You need it to equip your artisans. You need it to cast the giant ritual statues that legitimize your divine right to rule.
You literally need it for everything.
But to get the tin required to make that bronze, you are forced to look outward. You cannot be isolationist and survive.
The sources trace these ancient supply lines, and it is humbling. We aren't talking about a guy throwing a sack of rocks on a donkey for a weekend trip here.
No, not at all.
We are talking about highly sophisticated, multinational logistics networks. They were stretching from the mountains of Central Asia all the way across the Mediterranean, out through the Pillars of Hercules, to the Iberian Peninsula, and up to Cornwall in England.
We often treat globalization as a hallmark of the 20th century. But the Bronze Age was fundamentally defined by globalization.
Yeah, that's wild to think about.
The famous Uluburun shipwreck is a perfect example. It was discovered off the coast of Turkey and dates to around 1300 BCE.
And what was on it?
It was carrying 10 tons of copper from Cyprus and 1 ton of tin from distant eastern sources.
Mm.
It was literally a floating bronze factory representing the interconnected economy of the entire known world.
But this interconnectedness feels like a double-edged sword. Like, I have to ask the chicken or egg question here. Did the necessity of bronze foster diplomacy and cooperation, or did it just give empires the technological excuse they needed to invade people and hoard resources?
Honestly, both things are true simultaneously. If you look at the archives at Amarna in Egypt, they are full of these cuneiform tablets showing kings calling each other brother and bartering furiously for tin and copper.
Oh, wow. So there was real diplomacy.
There was.
Yeah.
But that reliance also bred intense vulnerability. The text highlights this as the birth of supply chain anxiety.
A feeling we are intimately familiar with today.
Exactly. Civilization had become a sprawling, interdependent supply chain thousands of years before we even invented the terminology.
Yeah.
And the ultimate consequence of this fragility is seen around 1200 BCE during the late Bronze Age collapse.
Right. This is when basically every major empire in the Eastern Mediterranean just imploded within the span of a few decades. Cities burned, writing systems were forgotten. It was basically apocalyptic.
It was. Now, historians are careful to point out that this collapse wasn't caused solely by a tin shortage. There is evidence of severe droughts, famine, seismic activity, and the mysterious marauding sea peoples.
Right. It was a perfect storm.
But tin acts as the perfect metric for systemic failure during that time.
Because if a localized drought hits, maybe a single city starves. But if the regional trade routes are disrupted by pirates or famine, the tin ships start sailing.
And if the tin doesn't arrive, the palace workshops halt. The armies can't replace broken weapons. The king can't defend the granaries from hungry rioters.
It's a domino effect.
A rapid one. The elites are overthrown, and the entire socioeconomic structure just unwinds. The exact network that allowed them to transcend their local geography guaranteed their mutual destruction the moment a critical link snapped.
They optimize for efficiency and power, completely sacrificing resilience.
Perfectly said.
So eventually, humanity crawls out of the ashes of all this, figures out how to smelt iron, which is harder to work with, but literally everywhere, so you don't need these massive trade networks anymore.
Right, iron is abundant.
And you would assume tin's career is over at that point. Like,
Yeah.
it had its moment in the sun, and now it's done. But it doesn't retire. It just pivots.
It finds a new niche.
It goes from extending human muscle with swords to preserving the human stomach, and eventually to building the human brain.
And this transition into the industrial era revolves around perhaps tin's most culturally ironic application, tin plate.
Okay, we're talking about the tin can now, which, let's clarify for everyone, is mostly made of steel or iron.
Yes, the term tin can is a bit of a misnomer. It is actually a robust steel cylinder coated in a micro-thin layer of tin.
Ah, okay.
And the mechanics of why this works delve right back into the chemistry. Iron is strong, but it oxidizes rapidly. It rusts.
Right.
Tin, on the other hand, is incredibly resistant to corrosion from water and weak acids, like, the acids found in food.
Well, wait, why not just use zinc? Because we galvanize steel with zinc all the time to stop rust.
That comes down to the galvanic series and toxicity. Zinc is more reactive than iron, so it acts as a sacrificial anode, corroding to protect the steel.
Okay, so it protects the can. What's the problem?
The problem is that zinc will readily leach into your food, and it tastes terrible and can make you really sick.
Oh, yeah, that's a problem.
Tin is less reactive than iron. It forms a pristine, non-toxic barrier between the steel and the tomatoes, or the beef stew inside.
Unless you dent the can. The sources mention this fascinating caveat. Because tin is less reactive than iron, if you scratch the inside of a tin can and expose the steel underneath, the food acts as an electrolyte.
Yes, the chemistry flips on you.
You create a tiny galvanic cell, and the steel actually rusts faster than it would if the tin wasn't there at all.
It's a delicate balance. But when the barrier is intact, the cultural ramifications are profound. The ability to hermetically seal food in a pinplate container fundamentally detached human survival from local geography and seasonality.
Napoleon famously offered a massive cash prize to anyone who could figure out how to preserve food for his armies.
He did, which led to the early glass jar methods.
But tinplate perfected it. Suddenly, an army didn't have to forage or loot the local countryside to survive. Polar explorers could pack thousands of calories into the freezing darkness. Massive urban populations exploding during the Industrial Revolution could be fed without needing a farm in the city center.
The tin can was a miracle of logistics and food security.
It really was.
But the documentation points out a profound cultural irony here. Contrast a tomato grown in a local garden with a tomato pulled from a tin can.
Right. The garden tomato has an origin. It tastes like the soil it grew in. It's tied to a specific month of the year.
It's tethered to the earth.
But the canned tomato is anonymous. It's immortal. The tin can became a symbol of military rationing, of cheapness, of the standardization of the human appetite.
We gained absolute security, but we severed our sensory connection to the origin of our nourishment.
That's a little tragic, honestly. But then from the stomach, tin's trajectory moves directly into the nervous system. As we entered the electrical age, tin found its ultimate calling in the form of solder.
And solder is the unsung hero of the digital revolution.
For anyone who hasn't opened up a piece of electronics, solder is the metallic glue that connects microchips, resistors, and capacitors to a printed circuit board.
Historically, solder was an alloy of lead and tin. It formed what's called a eutectic mixture.
Eutectic, meaning what?
It means it's an alloy that melts at a temperature significantly lower than either of its individual base metals. It flows beautifully, creates a highly conductive mechanical bond, and cools rapidly.
Sounds perfect.
It was. But as the severe neurological toxicity of lead became impossible to ignore, the global electronics industry was forced to pivot.
Right. The sources outline the massive push toward lead-free solder. Primarily the SAC alloys, which are roughly 95% tin mixed with a little silver and copper. But removing the lead wasn't just a simple swap, was it?
Oh, not at all. Pure tin or heavily tin-dominated alloys has a terrifying tendency to grow tin whiskers.
I read this and I honestly thought it was science fiction. Metal growing hair.
It is a genuine metallurgical nightmare.
How does that even happen?
When pure tin is subjected to compressive stress, and we're talking even just the ambient stress of being pleated onto a circuit board, it tries to relieve that pressure by slowly extruding microscopic, hair-like crystalline structures outward.
Just pushing them out.
Yes. These whiskers can grow millimeters long over months or years.
Which doesn't sound like a big deal until you realize the inside of a smartphone or a satellite is packed with components that are fractions of a millimeter apart.
Exactly. If a highly conductive tin whisker grows long enough to bridge the gap between two active electrical contacts, it creates a massive short circuit.
That is wild.
Entire satellites have been lost. Pacemakers have failed. Nuclear power plant shutdowns have been triggered by microscopic hairs of tin growing in the dark.
It perfectly illustrates the paradox the sources highlight. The author writes, bronze extended the hand, solder extends the nervous system.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
Without those tiny microscopic bridges of tin, a $1,000 smartphone is just a useless slab of glass and a pile of expensive sand. It joins our digital thoughts together.
And yet, it operates under this cloak of complete invisibility.
Yeah.
You look at a sleek electric vehicle or a modern server farm, and you marvel at the software, the aerodynamics, the touchscreens.
Stuff you can see.
Right. You're completely oblivious to the millions of microscopic metallic joints that make the illusion possible. The sleeker the technology becomes, the more we ignore the brutal physical reality required to build it.
Which brings us to the darkest, most difficult part of this deep dive. Because the cloud doesn't actually live in the sky. It has a physical mineral body.
It does.
And that body requires human beings to physically rip it out of the dirt. And the history of tin extraction is overwhelmingly a history of human exploitation.
The human shadow of tin mining is profound. The sources trace this timeline from ancient riverbed panning to the medieval period. In places like England, Cornish miners were digging deep, flooded shafts into the granite.
Just brutal conditions.
Unbelievable conditions. Using hand tools and early black powder, breathing in silica dust just to chip out cassiterite veins.
Then the Industrial Revolution scales the demand exponentially. You get massive stamp mills, crushing ore, deafening entire valleys.
And during the colonial era, the sheer violence of extraction is exported. European powers systematically drained tin from British Malaya, the Dutch East Indies, and Bolivia.
And the sources are very clear that it was a system built on coercive labor. Imperial monopolies established these massive dredging operations in company towns, utilizing migrant workforces operating in appalling conditions.
And the wealth generated by the tin flowed entirely outward to industrial centers in London or Amsterdam.
leaving behind fractured local economies and devastated ecosystem.
Exactly.
And what's really heavy is that the sources are clear that this isn't just a history lesson. This dynamic is alive and well right now, particularly in the realm of artisanal and small-scale mining.
Yes.
The document details operations in places like Indonesia's Bangka Belitung Islands, and they use a specific phrase to describe alluvial or placer mining that hasn't left my head. They call the wet sediment a trapdoor made of mud.
It's a terrifying description. Alluvial mining relies on density separation. Miners aren't blasting hard rock. They're using high-pressure water hoses to blast away wet sand and soil to free the heavier cassiterite particles.
It looks deceptively simple, like you're just washing mud.
But fluid dynamics in loose sediment are incredibly unpredictable. A 50-foot wall of wet sand can lose its structural integrity in a fraction of a second.
So the pit walls just liquefy.
Instantly. Landslides and pit collapses happen without warning. Miners are buried alive in mud before they even have a chance to shout.
The data provided in the sources is grim. Now, I want to be clear that we are just imparting the facts from the reports here, not taking a political stance, but citing reports from the U.S. Department of Labor and a survey by the International Labor Organization. They estimate that thousands of children are actively engaged in hazardous, informal tin mining in Indonesia alone.
It's a stark reality.
And on top of the labor conditions, there is the geopolitical classification. Tin is officially designated as a 3TG conflict mineral.
Yes, alongside tantalum, tungsten, and gold. The extraction and trade of these specific minerals, particularly in regions like the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, have been deeply integrated into the financing of armed militias.
The mechanics of this are tragic. A militia takes over an artisanal mine, they extort the miners, smuggle the cassiterite ore across a border, and blend it with legitimately mined ore at a smelting facility.
Right, they launder the rock.
And once the rock is melted down into a pure tin ingot, its chemical signature is wiped clean. You cannot tell if that tin funded a school or funded a war crime.
Organizations like the Responsible Minerals Initiative try to audit the supply chains, but the sheer opacity of the global market makes it incredibly difficult.
The metal itself is chemically neutral. It is simply an element obeying the laws of thermodynamics. But the economic system built around it operates on a ruthless principle: comfort upstream, sacrifice downstream.
That's exactly it. We want the pristine laptop delivered to our air-conditioned office in 2 days, but we demand an absolute psychological distance from the environmental and human costs required to build it.
We don't want to see the trapdoor of mud.
No. The sources detail how tin mining physically redesigns the earth. It strips away topsoil, turns forests into cratered moonscapes, dumps heavy metals into river systems, and hollows out mountains.
It's an element that literally solders our modern lives together, but the act of acquiring it leaves a trail of physical and communal fractures.
And because of that severe duality, the fact that tin holds our world together while carrying this unseen heavy burden, human cultures have historically projected incredibly rich psychological and spiritual symbolism onto the metal.
That transition from physical utility to cultural meaning is really fascinating to me. Let's look at medieval and Renaissance alchemy.
Okay, yeah.
Alchemists didn't just see metals as rocks. They believed metals had spiritual resonance tied to celestial bodies. Gold was obviously the sun. Silver was the moon. Iron, the metal of blood and swords, was Mars. Tin was assigned to Jupiter.
Which tells us exactly how they viewed its societal role. In classical mythology and astrological symbolism, Jupiter is the arbiter.
The judge.
Right. Jupiter represents order, expansion, law, and a stabilizing structure. Tin was perceived as the perfect elemental middle ground.
It wasn't as divine, untarnishable, and arrogant as gold. But it wasn't as corruptible, heavy, and toxic as lead. It was the great mediator.
Exactly. It's the metal of social cohesion, as you see this reflected in its historical usage. Pewter, which is predominantly tin, became the defining metal of the burgeoning middle class.
Right, because it wasn't the silver of the aristocracy, and it wasn't the crude wood of the peasantry. It was practical, durable, and accessible.
And its acoustic properties elevated it into the sacred realm. The document spends a lot of time on bronze ritual objects. Chinese ceremonial bronzes, or the massive temple bells found across Asia and Europe.
Yeah, why were bells made of bronze?
Well, the physical elasticity of the bronze alloy allows it to capture kinetic energy from a strike and release it as a sustained acoustic wave.
Okay.
A bronze bell essentially transforms hard metal into a lingering voice.
It takes human prayer and gives it a physical resonance that travels across miles.
It's beautiful.
But when you move from ancient ritual into modern pop culture, the symbolism gets a little more psychological. Take the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz. Why Tin L. Frank Baum could have made him out of iron or steel.
Well, because iron implies something cold, industrial, and unyielding. Tin, as we've established, feels almost human in its malleability.
Mhm.
It is soft. It is meant to coat and protect.
But the Tin Man's tragic flaw is that without a heart, without internal care and emotional animation, he rusts in place, he stagnates.
Which is funny chemically, but symbolically perfect.
Right, chemically we know pure tin doesn't rust, so maybe he was made of tin plate over iron, but the metaphor is powerful. Tin is vulnerable if it isn't maintained.
We see a different psychological coping mechanism with tin soldiers. The sources explore how the miniaturization of war through cheap, mass-produced tin toys served a distinct cultural purpose in the 18th and 19th centuries.
You take the massive, terrifying, chaotic machinery of geopolitical violence, artillery, cavalry charges, mass casualties, and you cast it into 2-inch colorful metal figures.
It reduces the trauma of systemic violence into neat, ordered ranks that a child or an adult can fully control on a parlor floor. It's a way of asserting dominance over forces that are otherwise entirely outside of your control.
That makes a lot of sense. But linguistically, the metal also takes on a derogatory edge sometimes. We talk about tin pot dictators, implying someone who projects the brutal strength of iron, but is actually cheap, hollow, and easily bent. Or having a tin ear, meaning you lack nuance or sensitivity.
It reflects an inherent elitism in how we value materials. There's a deep philosophical divide between luxury metals and utility metals. Gold's value is intrinsic. Its mere appearance signals wealth and status.
Right.
But tin demands to be put to work. Its entire cultural prestige is earned through service. Says, I am useful, I make this work.
I read this cultural analysis, and I came up with an analogy. If alchemy linked tin to the celestial governance of Jupiter, I link tin to middle management.
Middle management, okay.
Tin is the project manager of the periodic table. It's not the visionary CEO that's gold, standing on a stage, taking all the credit. It's not the brute force security guard at the door that's iron. Tin is the exhausted person in the middle, making sure the disparate departments actually talk to each other so the company doesn't collapse.
That is spot on. And right now, that project manager is suffering from severe burnout. We have leaned on this quiet utility metal from the Bronze Age to the Information Age, but modern market realities are pushing the tin supply to the absolute breaking point.
Let's talk about the modern vulnerability outlined in the sources. Fast forwarding to the present day, the economic landscape of tin is highly volatile. The document cites specific market data. As of May 11th, 2026, the official price for tin on the London Metal Exchange was sitting at a staggering $54,975 per metric ton.
For context, that is an astronomical valuation for a base industrial metal. And what is driving that price is a severe deficit in the physical reality of the supply chain.
We don't have enough.
Nowhere near enough. Global stockpiles of refined tin held in LME warehouses frequently drop to dangerously low levels. We're talking often measured in just a few thousand tons globally.
We are running the engine of global technology on fumes. And the sources point out that because tin is a small market metal compared to copper or aluminum, it is incredibly susceptible to price shocks and market manipulation.
Extremely susceptible.
They detail a massive historical precedent for this, too. The spectacular collapse of the International Tin Council in 1985.
That event fundamentally restructured the global metals market. For decades, an international cartel of tin-producing and tin-consuming nations attempted to artificially manage the global price of the metal.
How did they do that? Just price fixing.
Well, through a buffer stock manager. If the price of tin dropped too low, the manager would buy up massive amounts of physical tin, using credit to restrict supply and drive the price back up.
Okay.
If the price got too high, they would sell off stockpile reserves to cool the market.
It sounds good in theory, but you are basically fighting the laws of global supply and demand.
Exactly. And by the early 1980s, global production was surging, particularly from non-member countries like Brazil, while demand was softening due to the rise of aluminum packaging replacing tin cans.
Oh, right, aluminum cans.
So the buffer stock manager was forced to buy more and more tin on massive margin credit, just to keep the price floor from collapsing.
Just a giant house of cards built on debt.
In October 1985, the money simply ran out. The International Tin Council announced it could no longer honor its contracts. The London Metal Exchange instantly suspended all trading of tin.
Wow.
When the market finally reopened months later, the price of tin plummeted by more than half overnight.
Which completely devastated the economies of producing nations like Bolivia and Malaysia, wiped out brokerages, and essentially proved that you cannot artificially domesticate this commodity.
You can't control it like that.
But the terrifying part is that today we can't walk away from it. Our dependence is actually accelerating.
The energy transition and the digitization of the globe guarantee it. The rollout of 5G networks, the exponential production of electric vehicles, the massive expansion of solar photovoltaic arrays, every single one of these technologies requires massive amounts of lead-free solder to function.
The sources ask the obvious question here, why not just use something else? If tin is rare and expensive, just substitute it. But the physics won't let us.
No, they won't. You can try to use conductive epoxy adhesives, but they degrade over time and can't handle high heat. You can try other metal alloys, but they require much higher melting temperatures.
Which would be a problem for electronics.
It would fry the delicate silicon microchips during manufacturing. Nothing replicates that magical wetting behavior and low-temperature fluidity of tin.
So we are locked in. I know there is a recycling loop. The industry currently utilizes about a 33% recycled input rate, pulling tin from industrial scrap and urban mining.
Which involves chemically stripping solder from millions of tons of e-waste.
But 33% isn't enough to meet the surging demand curve, so we are forced back to the dirt. The document speculates on the future of extraction, and it sounds almost dystopian to me.
It's getting extreme.
We have picked all the low-hanging fruit. The massive, easy-to-mine cassiterite veins are largely gone, so mining companies are now looking backward.
They are eyeing the waste of the past. The tailings dams and slag heaps left behind by 19th and 20th century mining operations still contain microscopic particles of cassiterite that early industrial methods weren't sophisticated enough to capture.
So they're going to mine the old mines.
Yes. Modern operations are looking to deploy AI-driven optical sorting and advanced centrifugal systems to literally mine the garbage of our ancestors.
Which brings me to a really chilling realization that the sources point out. The United States, arguably the largest consumer of technology on the planet, has not mined any significant amount of tin domestically since 1993.
Not a single significant mine.
The entire digital and defense infrastructure of the country is completely dependent on imports from a handful of nations: China, Indonesia, Myanmar, Peru, and it's all funneled through a highly fragile global maritime shipping network.
The parallel to the ancient world is unavoidable.
We have spent 3,000 years developing microchips, satellites, and artificial intelligence only to recreate the exact same geographic vulnerability that caused the Bronze Age collapse.
It's a terrifying loop.
If a geopolitical conflict shuts down the Strait of Malacca, the modern tin ships stop sailing. And if the tin ships stop sailing, the server farms can't be built, the electric grid can't be upgraded, and the entire system locks up.
We are demanding infinite exponential technological growth from an incompatible element that required hundreds of millions of years of extreme magmatic pressure to form. Human ambition is essentially attempting to compress deep geological time into quarterly earning reports.
Tin acts as the ultimate physical bottleneck to our digital hubris.
It really does.
As we wrap up this deep dive into the hidden architecture of the world, the through line is undeniable. Tin is the great connector. It took soft copper and transformed it into the hard reality of the Bronze Age. It took marching armies and linked them to distant food supplies through the tinplate can. And today, it physically solders the ethereal digital thoughts of humanity to a printed circuit board.
The history of tin is a powerful reminder that civilization is not built solely on the materials of brute force. Survival and progress dictate that things must be connected. We are entirely dependent on the quiet, yielding materials that possess the chemical empathy to hold disparate pieces together.
So the next time you pick up your laptop, send an email, or you hit the ignition in your car, or you grab a can of soup from the pantry, recognize the illusion.
Look past the surface.
The cloud is not a magical, weightless ether floating above us. The digital world has a heavy mineral body. Every text message you send, every photo you upload is physically bridged by an ancient rock, forged in immense subterranean heat, pulled from the mud by unseen human hands and melted down to keep your life intact.
It demands a profound sense of scale and humility.
It really does. And I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. We talked earlier about the tin pest, that bizarre thermodynamic quirk where pure white tin, when exposed to severe cold, physically expands, loses its metallic bonds, and crumbles into a pile of gray dust.
Wow.
If the entirety of our modern world, our digital memory, our financial systems, our communications, our recorded history is currently resting on billions of microscopic bridges of tin, what happens to our legacy if we push the environment too far, or if the intricate alloy balances fail? Will the digital age be uncovered by future archaeologists as a permanent monument of human achievement? Or is our entire interconnected reality something that could, quite literally, crumble into powder overnight?